It's the inaugural record release from Discograffiti. Metal Machine Muzak is a slanted tribute to Lou Reed's divisive 1975 double LP Metal Machine music. Lester Bangs called it the greatest album ever made, but no matter how it hits you, it's always been the ultimate music freak secret handshake. My ambient reimagining features 4 16-minute, 1-second tracks, just like the original, and each one was created by a top-shelf indie rock visionary. Lou Barlow from Dinosaur Jr. and Sebadoh, Corey Hansen from Wand, W. Cullen Hart from the Olivia Tremor Control, and Mark Robinson from Unrest. That's right, not a slouch in the bunch, unlike 99% of the compilations you've ever begrudgingly purchased for the one and only band on it you just had to hear. Metal Machine Muzak will not be available on streaming. The digital version is finally available for purchase, and the vinyl will be shipped this summer. Pre-orders for the LPs are available now, but they're going fast. They're being produced in a very limited edition run of 300 numbered 180-gram metallic silver double LP gatefold copies, only 100 of which can be ordered online. These copies will be numbered from 1 to 100, and they're first come, first served. To order either the digital or the vinyl, just head over to patreon.com/discograffiti/shop. Again, that's patreon.com/discograffiti/shop. Don't miss out on Metal Machine Muzak, the ambient experience designed to make Brian Eno run screaming.
This is one of the most unbelievable interviews I've ever done in my life, and I appreciate it, and I thank you. I can retire now.
That means a lot to me. Coming from you, I'm sure you've sat in many a seat looking somebody in the eye, giving the answers to the questions you've heard over and over and over again. And I didn't want to ask the same questions, but I just wanted to make a connection with you and hear some truth. And I definitely feel like I got that from you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for doing this. And it's been an honor. It's been a lot of fun. You've asked me a lot of questions that I've never been asked before, and probably brought more out of me than I wanted to give or should give. But hey, is what it is. And I love you for it.
Welcome to Discograffiti, the Music Obsessives podcast that gives freaks like you and me the chance to connect with the brotherhood obsessed with rating the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever mattered. I'm your host, Dave Gebrow, and with 4 new episodes each week, you're going to gain a comprehensive knowledge of an act's history and output in the time it takes to listen to one album. Each new guest swings a hard left into an area you either had no idea you needed to know about or know all about and can't believe you're not alone out there. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on the Righteous Brothers, Psst, along with our special guest, Bill Medley. Here's just some of the many things Bill and I touch on in this podcast. An in-depth discussion about their plan to have Phil Spector produce only the singles, while, believe it or not, Bill himself produced absolutely everything else. A tremendous kitchen sink deep dive into You've Lost That Lovin Feelin, the Righteous Brothers song that we share as our all-time favorite, and an explicitly candid conversation about the damage that Phil Spector did to the brothers' relationship. If you're a Righteous Brothers superfan like me, you'll want to turn this free version off right now and opt for the director's cut of this episode on our Patreon page, which features a veritable boatload of essential bonus material. And you can find it in our Patreon shop for mere pennies at patreon.com/discograffiti/shop. Or better yet, just subscribe for access to the complete versions of all our shows. I recommend the Lieutenant tier at the very least, so you can access those director's cuts, but the major tier is what you want, if you want it all, including, for you true music lovers out there, a guest-packed cornucopia of off-the-beaten-path episodes, and the more obscure the better. Even if you're on the fence, just head over there because it's finally free to become a basic member. Coming up, we've got a career-spanning interview with the Beatles' Pete Best, Sonic Boom, aka Pete Kember, rating the Spacemen 3, the Byrds' Gene Parsons, and a massive, many-guested launch into the Beach Boys' entire catalog. So don't miss out. Open up your listening app right now and subscribe. And away we go then! Today's guest has a baritone so velvety, rich, and creamy, it's often mistaken for a high-calorie dessert. Alongside Bobby Hatfield, he's reached career heights that just don't get any higher. The music he's made and continues to make is so hauntingly moving and otherworldly that for me at least, it's a portal to a whole new dimension, a trapdoor to a sensory universe composed of pure emotion. One of a duo called the Righteous Brothers, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2003, the Vocal Group Hall of Fame in 2005, and the National Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame in 2019. Lads and ladies, he was born with the goods, but man alive did he put them to good use. Would you please welcome the disturbingly gifted and preternaturally melodic Bill Medley.
Wow, thank you. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Bill, this is honestly a dream. I've been doing the show for 3 years, and when I would think at the beginning of the show of the kinds of guests that I'd one day be able to get based on the work I put in, this is an external signifier that I'm doing something right to be staring at you.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure. And it's an honor to be talking, period.
I hear that. I'm sure you've talked about this a billion times, but what a name to be born with. I can't believe Medley is not a stage name. Did you feel like that was something you had to live up to?
It really never entered my mind until Bobby and I became pretty popular, and I was asking a few interviews, man, is that your real name? Or it never entered my mind that I had a musical name, but yeah, it's my name. A lot of people think I probably changed it, but nope, that's it. I'm a Medley.
Yeah, that's amazing. For as long as I can remember, I'm 52 years old. My dad grew up in the 60s. And, when he talked about the groups that were the most important to him, it was always two of them. It was the Beach Boys and the Righteous Brothers. Those were the two absolute pinnacle, top of the mountain. Your music has a haunting quality to it that to me is fraught with memories and emotion, especially because it's from as far back as I can remember. But I'm guessing that there's a similar effect to you just because of I think there's something about reverb where it keys in the memory center in the brain. I mean, when you go back and just as a general principle, when you go back and listen to your old songs and not just the hits, but all of it, does it really does it play a memory game for you? Do you go there in a big way?
Yeah, I mean, it's really odd because about the first maybe 2 years, if I go back and listen to it, so I can remember if I had a headache, if I didn't feel good, I can remember all that. But now, looking back and listening to the music, I can really separate myself from it. Yeah, I really feel that Bobby and I did some good work. And Bobby Hatfield was an incredible singer. So we didn't know if we were doing good work or not, but we sure were having a lot of fun.
You really didn't know? Because obviously the only quality-ometer you have is your own ears. And I know one of the, at least wrongs in my universe that I hope to set right tonight is that not just as a performer, but as a producer, you have a spot-on set of ears. So you had to have known that you were doing stuff of greatness because it wasn't your typical ordinary pop song. I mean, you were reaching high and farther beyond what people were doing at the time. This actually, when I was thinking of how best to do this format-wise, typically this is a music obsessive show. So the people who will be tuning in, besides your ravenous fans, typically expect, everything that an artist has ever done or everything that whatever group we're doing has ever done. But I thought because the single format was such a huge thing at the time and for you guys that we would do an overview of the singles that you guys released during your 2 recording eras initially, which spanned 1962 to 68 and then briefly in 74. So, just in case you've been living under a rock for a bunch of years, the Righteous Brothers were formed by Bill Medley and Bobby Hatfield in 1963. They had first performed together in 1962 as part of a 5-member group called the Paramours and adopted the name the Righteous Brothers when they became a duo. The most active recording period was in the 60s and 70s, and after several years inactive as a duo, Hatfield and Medley reunited in 81 and continued to perform until Hatfield's death in 2003. The term blue-eyed soul is thought actually to have been first coined by a Philadelphia radio DJ named Georgie Woods in 1964 when describing your music. Hatfield and Medley had this is one of my favorite things about you guys, and what makes you such a perfect team is that your contrasting vocal ranges, you were perfect for each other. It helped you guys to create a very distinctive sound as a duet, where together you really were like peanut butter and chocolate. You were like the singing Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. You guys each had the vocal talent to perform as soloists as well. Your solo career has been incredible. It still is. And you sang the low parts with your bass baritone voice. Hatfield took the higher register vocals with your tenor. And a key element that I want to keep returning to tonight is that you produced a number of the songs that the Righteous Brothers did. A lot of people who do know that you produced think you only produced soul and inspiration, but that's not the case. You produced Unchained Melody. You produced a slew of album tracks, right? Almost innumerable, right?
Yeah, I think I did all the albums except when we were on Haven in the 70s.
Okay. So, but in the 60s, you're basically producing 80 to 90% of the songs?
Yeah, Phil Spector, when we started, I wrote Little Latin Loopy-Loo, and we went into the studio, and because I wrote the song, everybody said, okay, what do we do? So I just started telling everybody what to do, and I guess that was my first producing job. And then when we went with Phil asked me to do the albums because he was going to take too long and spend too much money. So I did all the albums with Spector. And I think when we went to Haven Records in the 70s, we did 2 albums, and I didn't do them.
Okay. All right, so let's kick things off with a little section I love to call the run-up, which will get us to the first note of recorded music with great economy, hopefully. After graduating high school in Santa Ana in 1958, you formed a singing duo called the Romancers with your friend Don Fiducia, right, who also played guitar?
Yeah, Don Fiducia.
So you began writing songs and recording multi-track recordings in your living room. This is 1958. You're already messing with multi-track recordings at home, right?
Yeah, my grandpa would sit there and watch me. He was living with us for a while, grandma and grandpa. He says, man, he was watching me go from one recorder to the next recorder. He said, man, you're going to make $1 million doing this. I said, well, grandpa, I hope so.
I mean, that's amazing. Thinking about this, you were Spector. I mean, thinking about the pop auteur who was able to do everything from soup to nuts, you were him before he came into your life. And people don't realize that. And at 19, you had 2 songs. Is the first one Womaling?
Womaling. It doesn't mean anything. Womaling is...
Okay, all right. Womaling and Chimes of My Heart. And both of them were recorded by the Diamonds?
Yeah.
Okay, so you and Fiducia then formed the Paramours in 1960 with Sal Fasulo and Nick Turturro.
Yep.
Later joined by Mike Ryder and Barry Rillera, right?
Yep. Exactly.
All right. So you guys had your first paying gig at Little Italy restaurant in Anaheim, and you were signed to Mercury Records, actually the subsidiary label, Smash Records, and you released That's the Way We Love and Miss Social Climber in 1961. This is, it's almost like a Romeo and Juliet thing. So Bobby and you were in different groups. So Bobby was in a group from Anaheim called The Variations, and you had the Paramours, and Barry Rillera was the link, right?
Yeah, Barry played guitar in my group, and he also played guitar in Bobby's group, The Variations. Yeah.
So he said, you guys should maybe, check out what each other is doing, right? Is he the one who put you together?
Well, he would tell me about Bobby. He said, boy, this guy over that I'm working with is a great singer. And he would tell Bobby, he said, you got to hear this guy named Medley. We got to know each other. Yeah, I'd go in and see him. He would come in and see me. And yeah, he was he was pretty startling. I mean, especially in those days, you just didn't hear anybody doing that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. What a voice.
Yeah.
And then one of the members of the Paramours left, and then you guys decided to join forces and form a new Paramours. You started performing at a club called John's Black Derby in Santa Ana, and you were signed to a small record label called Moonglow in '62, and you released a single, There She Goes, She's Walking Away, in December '62, which is awesome. I mean, to my ears, and this is the first song that I've heard by you chronologically, you emerge, I mean, when you start singing on the track, you emerge like perfectly formed. There's no build to you finding your style. You're at 100% from the moment you open your mouth. Just perfectly natural. I don't know if did you feel that way do you remember recording that song?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I've always just sang the way I sing, and both Bobby and I were raised on rhythm and blues. So when I went into the studio, it oddly enough didn't scare me, didn't bother me. I kind of liked the way I sounded. I thought I just wanted to sound legitimate. I didn't want to sound like a white guy trying to do black, even though There She Goes isn't necessarily an R&B record, kind of a Drifters kind of record. So I was just happy that I sounded legitimate.
Yeah. For how long was your voice this deep? I picture you coming out of the womb saying Gaga like that. When did your voice become this beautiful baritone?
I ended up being 6'1" till about 15 or 16 years old. I was 5'3", and I was a first tenor. I sang exactly like Bobby Hatfield.
Wow.
Then in 1 year, I grew 7 inches, and my voice went from first tenor to deep baritone. So I've had this voice and bad sinuses for ever since I was about 16 years old.
Amazing. Well, anyway, with regard to the Paramours, it was pretty short-lived. You guys, unfortunately or fortunately, didn't have much success and broke up very soon, leaving the two of you to perform as a duo in '63. So you had 12 singles under the Moonglow label. Only 2 were moderate hits, My Babe and Little Latin Lupe Lu. Little Latin Lupe Lu, although, relative compared to the rest of your material, may be minor by comparison to, the towering classics that loomed so large before you. It was an important song for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Righteous Brothers, Bobby and I just had the strangest becoming successful. It's just such a weird story because we weren't really asking for it. Ray Maxwell, who owned Moonglow Records, was a friend of mine. He came in to see Bobby and I in John's Black Derby, and just for some reason, we had worked up Little Latin Lupe Lu, and we sang it that night. And he said, God, I love that song. We ought to record it. I said, well, cool. And we didn't have a name. We weren't the Righteous Brothers. We were still the Paramours.
You were recording still under that name?
Well, we recorded Little Latin Lupe Lu as no name. We recorded the song, and then we needed a name.
Right.
So I think it was Bobby. Black Marines in Orange County used to call us the Righteous Brothers because and Orange County was very white in those days, but there was a Marine base there, El Toro Marine Base, and a lot of the Black Marines heard that there was these 2 guys down at the club singing rhythm and blues. So a lot of times when Bobby and I were coming to work, they would say, hey, Righteous Brother, how you doing? Which meant good friend. And then some kids started yelling it out while we were there. So when we record Little Latin Lupe Lu, I think it was Bobby said, well, let's use the name that the Marines have been calling us, the Righteous Brothers. So we used it, not thinking that anything would happen with Little Latin Loopy Loo, and it did enough, at least to put us in the race.
Well, more than that, though, because even though it only peaked at, when you compare it to what happened later on, it only peaked at number 49 on June 8th, 1963. Number one, you were offered a national distribution contract by VJ, but it was also purchased the following year by Phil Spector. And probably more importantly for you, it's been covered by more than 20 artists, which I had no idea, notably by Bruce Springsteen, who performed it live for decades. And that's basically your first outing. So that's a really good first effort. I mean, the Chancellors recorded in 64, the Kingsmen, the all-women garage band, the Heartbeats, did a version where Loopy Loo was a boy. And then in 66, Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels hit number 17 with the song, and then Bruce. Not bad for first swing at bat.
Not bad. Yeah, not bad at all. Sounds good when you said it.
And it's about a woman named Lupe Laguna, right?
Yes, yeah. She was a girlfriend of mine. And I mean, the song is loosely about Lupe. It just felt like a fun thing to sing. Little Latin Lupe, just kind of had a good sing-along thing. And Lupe takes full credit for it.
I'm sure she's thrilled with it. So there was a performance of this at the Rendezvous Ballroom in Newport Beach, which really kind of threw a match into the gasoline, right? What happened there?
Well, actually, Bobby and I recorded Little Latin Loopy Loo. Kind of nothing happened with it. And our contract was running out at John's Black Derby. And literally, Bobby and I were walking out the back door and probably would have never seen each other again. I mean, we loved each other and we were good friends, but we were two different guys. He was, pretty much a button-down college guy, and I was a Levi's and T-shirt motorcycle riding jerk. But as we were walking out the door, a friend of ours, Mike Patterson, was working at the Rendezvous Ballroom, and he would come down to the club and watch Bobby and I, and he said, "You got to come down to the Rendezvous Ballroom." And it was a teenage place, and it was where surf music started. So we weren't very excited about that because we weren't a surf group. We were rhythm and blues. But he talked us into doing it, and we would sing Little Latin Loopy Loo while we were there, and the kids loved dancing to it. And they said, "Boy, we love that song. What is that song?" We said, "Well, you could probably buy it or order it." We recorded it. So they went down to the local record store, and the record store said, "We've never heard it." The kids loved to dance to it, but they couldn't buy it. So I think Mike Patterson and Bobby Hatfield took 1,500 of the 45s down to Gracie's music store and said, "Here, if you sell them, great. If you don't, turn them into Frisbees." We don't. And the Rendezvous Ballroom, there would be about 2,000 kids. It was a huge old-style big band ballroom. So 1,500 kids went down to Gracie's. We told them they have it at Gracie, and they went down and bought it. And in those days, in L.A. anyway, it was KFWB and KRLA. And I think it was KRLA. They would call around to some of the certain record stores that were, selling a lot of records and say, "Well, what's selling? What should we be playing?" So, well, we sold 10 Elvis Presley songs. We sold 5 Everly Brothers songs, but we sold 1,500 songs called Little Latin Loopy Loo by the Righteous Brothers, whoever that is. And he said, "Wow." He said, "Send that up to me." So Gracie sent it up, and I think it was Bob Eubanks. I can't remember. So he took the record, and he was promoting a record hop that he was doing. And so, "Hey, kids, I'm going to be down at Santa Ana High, And in the background, he was playing Little Latin Loopy Loo, our record, only because it had great energy and whatever. And the minute they played the ad for his record hop, I guess the phones lit up and everybody said, "What the heck is that song?" And they started playing it, and it just took off.
The most amazing thing about that story is that I'm guessing that from the very beginning of that whole experience, that nothing was planned out. It was just go by the seat of your pants, like talk to the crowd about the song. They don't know where to get it. Let's just bring some records down. But it was such a foolproof plan that it fell into place as if you had masterminded this whole thing. I mean, it really was kind of a foolproof plan if you think about it, but totally impromptu, right?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have a clue of what we were doing. We weren't trying to make it a hit record. We were just trying to get it to the kids. It's so odd about the Righteous Brothers that Bobby and I never, ever asked for anything. It just came to us. And Bobby and I were together 6 months before Little Latin Loopy Loo became a hit record.
Yeah.
That's how long we were together. And Little Latin Loopy Loo happened, and we were asked to go on the first Beatle tour, first Rolling Stone tour.
Right.
We were asked to do Shindig.
That was April 63. Your career is just begun. It's on fire. And then My Babe comes out. And this is the last time that you break the top 100 before You've Lost That Lovin Feelin. And the interesting thing to me about this song is that it's kind of a blues-based, sultry vamp that later on, looking with hindsight being 2020, it's not necessarily in what would become known as your wheelhouse. But at the time, you were convinced that this is your stock in trade at this point in time, that the upbeat type of material was really what you were going to be doing, right?
Yeah, that's who we were. I mean, not so much Little Latin Loopy Loo, but My Babe. That's who we were. That's who we are. That's still, I do a blues song in the show. And so, yeah, My Babe, a lot of that early stuff on Moonglow, that's really who we were. And then Phil Spector came along with Lovin Feelin, and it just changed the direction. I mean, we tried to hold on to who we were and how we sang. But Lovin Feelin was so big, it just changed.
Do you feel a little bit remiss about that? I mean, do you feel like the haunting ballads is not really as much where your heart lies, but more material like My Babe?
Not necessarily. I mean, we loved, I've mentioned the Drifters. I loved the Drifters, the Platters, and all those great, singers. So we loved a lot of different music. So we weren't bummed about it,
yeah.
But we did try and hold on as hard as we could. And even in Lovin Feelin, Phil Spector was smart enough to try and introduce the real Righteous Brothers when it came to the section in Lovin' Baby, Baby, I Get Down on Monday. And that's kind of when, the gospel call and response thing happened. And that was the closest to rhythm and blues that we got in that record. But he was smart enough to want to try and hold on to that sound.
And then, like you said just before, right after My Babe, that next month, you opened for the Beatles in their first U.S. tour, and then actually left before the tour finished. I'm guessing because there was such a clamor for the Beatles at the time that it was, you felt like the focus was taken off you guys, right?
Well, yeah, we didn't pay much attention to it. It was such an amazing tour. Even the Beatles were very surprised how the audience was. But the truth is the reason we left is that we had an opportunity to do Shindig. So we went to Brian Epstein and said, God, we have this opportunity to do this show, and can we leave early? He said, of course. And he was very supportive. Actually, he asked if he could manage us, and we turned him down. Who turns down Brian Epstein and leaves the Beatle tour and survives?
That's wild. Oh, hi, I'm Dave Gebrow. I threw my career as a licensed hearing instrument specialist in the trash, sold my house, and moved to the East Coast with my wife and 5-year-old son in order to focus on making the ultimate weekly podcast for music obsessives thrive. But weekly wasn't enough for me, so I bumped it up to 4 shows a week. Becoming a subscriber to Discograffiti's Patreon gives you access to hundreds of exclusive episodes. As a 2-show per week private, you get the weekly show by and for our Patreon family, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. As a 3-show-a-week lieutenant, you'll get early release, ad-free, extended director's cuts of the main show. They're the shows as they were intended to be heard. Plus, you'll gain access to half the Patreon archive and the upcoming Beach Boys Behind the Mirror companion episodes, which will feature dozens of special guests from within the Beach Boys camp talking about and rating their music. But as a 4-show-per-week major, you'll be drowning in a flood of must-hear binge listening, because I'll be bombarding you with episodes about super cool bands that are too subterranean for free Fridays. It's like going to music college, but with a tuition that makes all kinds of sense. Plus, our entire Patreon archive is yours. Discograffiti's Top 10, our Buried Treasure show, Rock Cousteau, our Slag Off show, Queasy Listening, and the Private Press with Paul Major. And all that for the price of only a cup of coffee a week. Times are tough, you say? Fret not, because there's a $1 tier. Or you could just join as a basic member and buy episodes piecemeal from our Patreon shop. Don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not giving. Check out patreon.com/discograffiti to find the tier that's right for you. Once again, that's patreon.com/discograffiti. So what was your master plan? I mean, who was managing you at the time? Was it the gentleman from Moonglow?
No, nobody was managing us. We didn't need a manager. People were just coming to us. And no, we never had a manager until, maybe after I had the hit, I've had the time of my life for Dirty Dancing.
Are you serious? So
Yeah.
87?
Yeah, never had a manager.
That is unbelievable. I mean, that's wild.
Well, David Cohen was our business manager, taking care of the money and stuff. But we had a terrific agent, Jerry Parencio was our agent. And between him and I, we took care of a lot of what we did, how we did. And he booked, obviously, all the tours and stuff.
I mean, again, that idea of the auteur who can do the whole package, that adds a whole other layer because people don't think about it, but all the details that go into running a career like that, that's way more than just a full-time job. And you add everything else into it. Did a lot of that work then fall on your shoulders and not Bobby's?
Yeah, but Bobby wasn't much interested in the business side. He just loved to sing as long as I was willing to kind of take care of things. And Jerry Parencio, I must say, our agent at the time, very instrumental. He probably was more of a manager than an agent. So I give him a lot of credit. But yeah, no, Bobby was very happy, just saying, "No, yeah, you're doing fine."
Did any of the Beatles come to you and say, and try to convince you to stay?
No. No, they knew it was a big deal to go do a TV show. And
yeah,
the Beatles tour it was pretty rough. The whole time we were on, they were clapping and yelling, "We want the Beatles, we want the Beatles." So it wasn't a hard tour to leave. The Rolling Stone tour was great because they hadn't made it yet. And it was a Southern California tour. And we were pretty big in Southern California because of Loopy Lou and My Babe and Coco Joe and all those songs. So that was great. That was really great.
That was the following year. That was 64, but still before Spector came into the picture, still before your massive hits.
Yeah. And it was fun in those days. We also ended up doing a song called Try to Find Another Man.
That's your next single. So April 64, that came out. And I wanted to ask you specifically about that song, because I know when you guys got phenomenally big, that there was a little bit of ego jostling about who gets this song, who gets that song. But Try to Find Another Man is like a 50-50 thing. You guys are like splitting it down the middle. Was there a preference early on between either of you taking solos on songs versus a 50-50 thing like Try to Find Another Man?
Well, we tried to keep it as even as possible. Phil Spector, when Phil came along, he kind of, Lovin' Feelin. I did the majority of the singing, and obviously Bobby Hatfield did Unchained Melody. And the truth is that was probably the worst thing that could happen to us. You could kind of feel the Righteous Brothers being ripped apart But Try to Find Another Man is a very interesting record because we went into the studio with Ahmet Ertegun and Jerry, and we recorded the old Roy Hamilton. We were huge Roy Hamilton fans. So we took You Can Have a, I Don't Want a, and we were going, You Can Have a, I don't want to. And we loved the track so much that we said, well, let's rewrite it. Let's write a song to that track. So we wrote Try to Find Another Man, and it worked. Try to Find Another Man is one of my favorite Righteous Brothers songs.
Me too. My favorite aspect of it, besides the way that it really is a 50-50 partnership in it, is the way you pack all the lyrical information into each of the stanzas. I love the meter of the lyric in that. Is fantastic.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I was surprised that didn't become a hit record, but
yeah, me too. I mean, all the material here, all of it is fantastic. It just so happened that some of them got bigger than others, but it's very hard to differentiate better, worse. Usually I do a star rating thing from 0 to 5 stars with all the releases, but this is pointless. I mean, this is like, music of mystical mountaintops. I mean, it's impossible to assign and affix like a star thing on it. It's ridiculous. And then your version, I know it wasn't a single, but your version of I Just Want to Make Love to You, a song I've heard a zillion times. It's definitely one of my favorite versions of the song. I mean, just like you do with Straight from the Heart, your upcoming record, you just get inside this and inhabit the song. The vocal is absolutely insane.
Well, thank you. Those kind of songs, man, I Want to Make Love to You is just really kind of who I am, and recording that song was fun. And of course, in those days, I just sang it once or twice. It was probably 4-track machine, maybe 2-track, I don't know. So all those songs that we did, Loopy Lou, My Babe, Coco Jam, was all just Bobby and I standing at a microphone singing, and we would do it once or twice and say, okay, that sounds okay.
Yeah, same with Bring Your Love to Me and This Little Girl of Mine. Again, great songs. You didn't realize it, but right around the corner, your lives were going to change because you performed in a show at the Cow Palace in Daly City where the Ronettes were also appearing, and Phil was conducting the band for the show. Do you remember the first time you met Phil?
Yeah, I can remember meeting Phil at the Cow Palace.
Did you pull one of your Brian Epstein, like, we don't need you, we're good on our own things with him?
No, I mean, we didn't discuss working with him in those shows, man. I mean, there was probably literally about 12 acts. I mean, every act would go on and do about 2 songs or 3. We didn't get to know Phil, but apparently Phil was impressed with what he saw us doing and probably impressed how the crowd was reacting to us. We came home and got a call from Ray Maxwell, Moonglow Records, saying Phil Spector wants to produce you.
That must have come as a surprise because he had never worked with Caucasians, ever.
Yeah, no, and he was more famous for doing, called the Wall of Sound, but girl groups. So we thought, man, that's weird, but maybe that's a good weird, So we said, yeah, we'll give it a shot. We'll go in the studio with Phil. And I think between Phil and Moonglow Records, I think Phil leased the remainder of our contract with Moonglow, which was about 2 years that we had left.
And then, he picked up the phone and reached out to Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil and said, hey, would you mind writing a song for this group I'm going to work with? So they got to work on some song that you would be singing at some point in the near future, which of course turned out to be You've Lost That Lovin Feelin. And it became your first huge hit. I mean, huge beyond huge. Huge in a way that people don't really get to be anymore. Unless you're Taylor Swift. It was a monster. I mean, it's like incomparable. It reached number 1 in February 65. In fact, according to BMI, it became the most played song on American radio and television of the 20th century, with more than 8 million airplays by the end of '99 and nearly 15 million by 2011. It was overtaken in 2019 by Every Breath You Take. But, it had that distinction for 22 years. And you're like at the top of the highest mountain that's conceivable. And that has to be a crazy feeling, right? I mean, what does it feel like knowing that you've accomplished this thing?
Well, having the most played record in the history of American radio or whatever was just, Bobby and I just couldn't screw our head onto it. That's such a weird thing to have happen, that you want to be in the record business. You've watched Little Richard, you've watched Ray Charles, you dream about that stuff. But I mean, to have the most played record, we couldn't screw our head onto it. It was a out of body. It was just too big to think about. You just couldn't wrap your brain around it.
Did either of you go nuts? I mean, I know for me, if something like that happened to me, it would be almost literally an out-of-body experience where my behavior would probably change just because I would be so excited. I don't know if I'd be able to sleep. And then I would just be pacing. I wouldn't be able to sit. How did this manifest in you and Bobby? And were you able to connect over this, or did it wind up driving a wedge in some way?
No. We were both extremely excited about it, and thought it was a huge, huge honor. I don't think we spent a lot of time thinking about it. We would talk about it once in a while, mainly to say, boy, how weird is this that we got the most played record? How weird is that? Because we were just, it was a mind blower. I guess we just didn't realize the dynamics of what that was. And maybe we just were afraid to think about it. I mean, if you really sat down and really thought about it, it's quite remarkable.
It really is. Yeah. Just to rewind a little bit, because I didn't know, I did a real deep dive on just this song. There's a few of them. This is obviously a huge one, but I didn't know that actually they took a cue from Baby, I Need Your Loving by the Four Tops, which was then rising in the charts. So that was what steered it in the direction of being a ballad. And I also didn't realize that Phil was responsible for the bridge, and that the bass piano line was kind of cribbed from Hang On Sloopy.
Yeah, or Paul Revere and all the Louie was down not.
That's right.
Yeah. It was interesting that he put that in the record, but I think that ended up to be a big part of the song. But Barry and Cynthia were writing, what is it? Baby, I need your lovin'.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is because that's kind of a moving ballad. I always call them a moving ballad, that are really ballad songs, but the tracks are, kind of got a little energy to them. And when they started teaching us Lovin' Feelin, Barry Mann and Phil Spector would sing it to us. And they both had real high voices. So when they sang it, they sang it like, you never close your eyes anymore when I kiss your lips. And that would be the voice that I would use. And it's a little technical, but that was probably an F. And I couldn't get to the, you lost that love. I couldn't get to that high note. So they had to lower it. And every time they would lower it, Phil slowed it down. And finally, when we got the C, it was, you never close your eyes anymore. So it was very interesting. Matter of fact, when Barry first heard it over the phone, he was yelling at Phil, you have it on the wrong speed.
And frankly, to me anyway, that is what unleashed the magic of the song. It's like, that's what started the car for the tune. For me anyway. But I know at the time, it must have felt a lot weirder than it does now. Now we kind of take it for granted. And I also, I love the little details where, I know that Phil actually wrote, gone, 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 whoa, 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 which Weil disliked and wanted out of the song. And I didn't know that, but You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin, the actual line was originally only intended to be a dummy lyric.
Yeah.
Which is nuts because it's so brilliant. But it was just a placeholder. These little things are amazing to find these out.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because after it's all done and on the radio, nobody knows all the little twists and turns of how you got to that end that ending thing. And Bobby and I loved the record, You've Lost That Lovin Feelin, but we said, well, it's not going to be a hit because it's too long, way too long. I mean, in 64, 65, the songs really had to be probably about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes long, and this was over 4 minutes in reality.
But what I love about Phil is Phil wrote the wrong time on the single, right? Just to throw people off.
Yeah, he didn't want to put 4 minutes, so I think he put 350 or something on there. So we just figured wouldn't possibly be a hit. I sounded like I was on the wrong speed, and it was a real kind of different song for the times. But I always felt that after it became a hit, that everything that was considered wrong with it is probably what made it such a giant record. And I think because it was such a dramatic, after Phil slowed it down and you never close your eyes. For these kids that were buying the records, I think that was probably one of the first real legitimate, oh my God. I felt that way. I think it was one of the first records that kind of did that. Everything else before that was Frankie Avalon and those guys were making great records, but they were real sweet, nice songs and records. And this was pretty honest and brutal.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely is. And also, hands down, props to the Wrecking Crew who absolutely pulled off an amazing feat. On this track, there were 4 acoustic guitars, 3 pianos, 3 basses, 2 trumpets, 2 trombones, 3 saxes, and then the drums. I mean, it's an enormous amount of instrumentation on there. And also, I know that Bobby reportedly expressed his annoyance to Phil when he learned that you were going to start the first verse alone and he had to wait until the chorus. Bobby asked him, what am I supposed to do during your solo? And he said, you can go directly to the bank.
Yeah, that's true.
Which, of course, I'm sure he did. And of course, not only did it become known as this is the song that's most illustrative of Phil's wall of sound, but Andrew Loog Oldham, who was then the manager of the Stones and a big fan of yours, actually coined that term to describe this song. So the wall of sound, that term was created by him to describe Lovin' Feelin'.
Oh, wow, that's very cool. I didn't know that.
Ever wondered what your favorite bands talk about after the gig on the long van ride between Reno and Salt Lake City? Do you miss having in-depth conversations about music with your closest friends, picking apart why some songs are good and why some miss the mark completely? Do you read every inch of the available liner notes and still shake a fist at the clouds yelling for more? Damn it, more? If any of this sounds familiar, 1001 Album Complaints is the podcast for you. Every week, musicians and close friends give irreverent but informed takes on a new classic album pulled randomly from the book 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. The hosts do extensive research telling the stories behind your favorite records and helping you better understand how songs, both great and terrible, were conceived and built from the ground up. In short, it's a deep dive with lots of laughs. So if you want to sound informed and funny when talking about music, I recommend you follow or subscribe to 1001 Album Complaints right now. Full disclosure, I've been on 1001 Album Complaints twice now, and both times I had a hell of a good time. Don't be fooled by the fun, offhanded interplay and the undeniable chemistry. It takes a lot of work to make this show appear as laid back and easy as it feels. An abundant amount of research goes behind every episode, and whether or not I agree with them, I have to respect the fact that the guys have always got an opinion, and they'll go down fighting trying to prove they're right. Seriously, check it out. I respect the hell out of these guys. Brian Wilson later referred to Good Vibrations as his attempt to surpass You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin'. And he, of course, has recorded numerous unreleased renditions of the song. And Phil counted it as the pinnacle of his achievement for his record company. Is it your favorite Righteous Brothers song?
Yeah. I mean, your hit records are like your children, You hate them all. No, I'm just No, you just love them all. I mean, you gotta Lovin' Feelin' is just a spectacular record. I'd like to take full credit for it, but Bobby and I just played one piece of that record. I mean, the track is amazing. The song is amazing. And Bobby and I did a good job and an unusual job vocally, because boy, when it comes to that baby, baby, and we start doing that shouting back and forth. Well, Phil, that wasn't written. I mean, Phil just said, here's what you say, here's when you say it. And he said, you guys just do what you do.
Right.
And boy, Bobby Hatfield just ripped it apart.
And then you guys and Phil kind of got an operation going, which was Phil was wanting to concentrate on making these masterpiece grand slam singles, and then you would produce basically the rest of the record.
Yeah.
So you wound up producing all these intense amounts of songs. And after You've Lost That Lovin Feelin was so successful, Man and Weil were then commissioned to start writing You're My Soul and Inspiration for you guys, but it wasn't completed. And instead, Spector asked Carole King to write a song for you guys, which turned out to be my all-time favorite, Righteous Brothers.
That's what I was going to say when you asked what's my favorite. Just Once in My Life is my favorite song.
That's your favorite? You know why it's your favorite? Because it's the best one.
Okay.
No, I mean, Just Once in My Life, there is an element of intensity in this song that to me goes way beyond anything that was going on at that time. What I hear in there is not just singing to a girl. I hear really like one of those moments in a movie where the camera lifts up into the heavens and you see somebody dropping to their knees and screaming to the sky. It really feels like screaming up at God and having a conversation. It is one of the most intense songs I've ever heard in my life. I can't help, even when I talk about it, from getting chills up and down my spine. It really is an existential scream into the heavens. Please tell me about this one. While I feel like Lovin Feelin is absolutely perfect, this to me is unquestionably your best song.
Yeah, I can't say that it's a better song than Lovin Feelin. Obviously, Lovin Feelin is a great song, but Just Once in My Life is kind of a B version of Lovin Feelin, but not a B version. Her and Jerry just killed it, and it was so fun. Actually, it was fun to work with Carol because she was just a young lady then, young girl, and every time she would sing us a song, we'd say, why don't you record this stuff? And she said, no, I couldn't do it. She was too bashful. But Just Once in My Life, probably if Lovin Feelin wasn't such a big record, and Just Once in My Life probably would have been a bigger record. I think, didn't it go into the top 10 or?
It hit number 9, but I mean, that to me, that's irrelevant. I mean, a masterpiece is a masterpiece, and you hit it out of the park. Do you remember also, because I read that there was tension because Lovin Feelin and Just Once in My Life are very Bill Medley centric. Yeah. So do you remember, was there actual tension between you and Bobby that was later dealt with Unchained Melody and Ebb Tide?
Yeah, well, I've only said this a couple of times, but when Lovin Feelin was number one, Phil Spector had a meeting with me and asked me to leave the Righteous Brothers. And it wasn't so much that he thought, even though he said, boy, we can make great records and all that, he was upset that You've Lost That Lovin Feelin became a Righteous Brother record and not a Phil Spector production. So he took it very personal, and that was his first attempt of ripping us apart. That was his first attempt. And I said, no, I'm not leaving Bobby. And the next song better have Bobby in it a lot more, even though it turned out kind of like Lovin Feelin, where it was kind of a medley record, and probably rightfully so. I mean, if you're going to follow Lovin Feelin, you have to dupe it somehow. And Bobby he wasn't thrilled with that. I wouldn't have been thrilled with it either, because Bobby's just such a great singer, and to be not left out, but
it wasn't a Bobby showcase.
No, it wasn't at all. And there was no way, because it had such a wide, it would go from real low to real high. Well, Bobby couldn't get down there. He'd have to wait until we get to that chorus, and so there was no way of splitting it up. We even said, listen, Bobby needs to be singing on this more. And we even tried a couple of things, but it just didn't work. but he got even with me.
Things obviously with Unchained Melody and Ebb Tide, I mean, the scales tip back in the right direction. But at that time, do you remember dealing with Phil with a cocked brow? Like, we got to look out for this guy, he's a snake. Because of that, did you feel some odd, strange behavior happening?
Well, I did, and our agent Jerry Perencio, we had a meeting with Phil because I produced the albums. I accidentally produced Unchained Melody, and because it was on the album, and Phil, I guess, thought it was such a bad record that he would put it on the B side of his song, Hung on You, which was another Carol and Jerry's song, great song too.
Yes.
But for some reason, the disc jockeys just turned it over and started playing Unchained Melody, and it became a big hit. So Phil called a meeting to talk about what we were going to record and put out next, because Roy Hamilton and I think a couple of guys did Unchained Melody, and then they did Ebb Tide. So it was kind of a natural thing to do. And he said, I think we should do Ebb Tide, and I think it should be Bobby by himself. So that's the first time to our faces you could kind of feel what Phil was trying to do. But Bobby, they asked me, and I said, no, I think we can do obviously the public likes my voice. I should be on it somewhere.
And by the way, it's worth mentioning, I believe at least, some of Bobby's best work is on the bridge of Just Once in My Life.
Yeah. You're right. So when they asked Bobby, Phil says, well, Bobby, what do you think? And he had a meeting with Bobby before Jerry and I showed up. And Bobby said, yeah, I think it should be me. And it should be me by myself. And boy, you could just hear the Righteous Brothers ripping apart at that moment. So they recorded it. Phil made a great record, and Bobby, as usual, did a great job. And then we did maybe another album with Phil. And then when we left, Bobby and I had a chance to kind of put it back together.
Yeah. I mean, you still had some great work to go. I'm curious, how important was the coin toss to your professional process? Because it seems like, I know that Unchained Melody, it was down to a coin toss who was going to sing that.
Yeah, well, Bobby used to do it with his band, The Variations. He used to do it in a show, and we both loved the song because we loved everything Roy Hamilton did. So when I would do the albums, there was only so many duets I could come up with. So I would have Bobby do a solo, and I would do a solo. And Bobby said, for my solo this time, I'd like to do Unchained Melody. That's a great call. And so I arranged it, actually played piano on it and sang vocal background, but it was just an album cut. Phil put it on the B-side, and it just flat took off. And the truth is, I was very happy for Bobby, because now I could go to the bank.
Right, exactly. And then also you achieved something that I don't believe anyone else has. In 1990, when Ghost came out, I saw that movie opening night. And I remember coming home and Unchained Melody was stuck in my head. Anyone who saw that movie at that time, the song was stuck in their head. And what wound up happening with you guys, and I don't remember this being the case, but apparently it is, that not only did Unchained Melody come back into the charts, but you had a new version of it as well. And you were the first act ever to have two versions of the same song in the top 20 at the same time.
Yeah,
that must have felt great.
Well, it was nuts. I mean, because Lovin' Feelin' was in Top Gun, we knew that if the record company would have released Lovin' Feelin' again, it would have been a hit again. It was getting airplay, and these kids, it was a new record to them. Matter of fact, they would come home and tell their mom and dad, boy, you got to hear these guys, the Righteous Brothers. You'll love man, you're here because of the Righteous Brothers. So when Ghost came out and the radio station started playing it so much, I said, man, the record company has to release it. And we called the record, and they said, no, we're not going to release it. So I went to David Cohen, was our manager now, and I said, we need to re-record that song. And so we re-recorded it. They put it out, and it was on Curb Records, and Mike Curb printed up a 500,000 copies of it. And so when it was distributed, kids just flocked to go buy that record. Well, they were buying our record, kind of thinking that they're buying the song that they're hearing on the radio. So in those days, the top 100 was based on airplay and sales. So we were getting a lot of airplay because of that record and a lot of sales because of this record. So they both became hit records.
That time in your career was, just from my perspective, batshit crazy. From 87 to 90 was like, that must have felt like just pure electricity. Waking up every morning and living through the day must have been such a treat.
Well, it was nuts. I mean, it was a crazy time. I had Lovin' Feelin' in Top Gun. Then I did the song I've Had the Time of My Life for Dirty Dancing.
Yeah.
And then Unchained Melody and Ghost. And all of a sudden, we were just hotter than we had ever been.
Right. I remember, I mean, you couldn't get away from you guys. Not that one would want to, but you were all over the place, really. And by the way, my vote, I believe, for the song that got away, that I think the album track that should have been a single, is See That Girl.
Oh, well, see, oddly enough, even when I was recording, I had that conversation with Phil that he wanted me to leave the Righteous Brothers. And that was written by Barry and Cynthia, too. See That Girl. I really felt that he was producing that song to be a Bill Medley single or a Righteous Brothers single, whatever. And I think it was once again, his way of tearing us apart. But it's a great song. It's one of my favorite songs.
Such a good one. And so Ebb Tide is actually one of the last songs that Phil produced for you guys. It reached number 5, and it's one of my favorites. It actually has a simplicity to it that works so perfectly for it. And obviously, I know he was digging back into some of the older songs that you guys would do in the Variations and the Paramours, right?
Yeah.
Before we kind of move into the Verve Records era, you guys had a couple appearances in movies, A Swingin' Summer and Beach Ball, and also the first rock act to play the Strip in Las Vegas at the Sands. That I didn't know, and that's really cool.
That was very cool. I mean, we were 25 years old and working at the Sands Hotel. Frank Sinatra was in the main room. We were, what they called the lounge. It seated about 500 or 600 people. And we were doing 3 shows a night. And Lovin' Feelin' was number 1 all over the world. And Jerry Parencho, our agent, said, you should go to Vegas while you can because it'll pay off for the rest of your life. And it did. And I'm still working Vegas because of that. Boy, you want to talk about an out-of-body experience, to be at the Sands Hotel with Frank Sinatra in the main room and us in the lounge. There would be a line a mile long going into Sinatra's room and a line a mile long getting into our room. It was pretty exciting time.
So what was the most difficult aspect about being a kid in a candy store? The world was yours. I mean, you could basically do whatever you wanted, I'm guessing. Did you and or Bobby struggle with any aspect of that?
It's hard not to. I mean, the way we made it so fast. I mean, we were together 6 months before Little Latin Loopy Lou. And so it just happened so fast and so strong that, any act would have a tough time dealing with it. I think we didn't go totally off the rails, but we took advantage of a lot of what was happening. I mean, we were just 2 normal guys that used to drive up and down the street trying to pick up girls, And all of a sudden, girls you wouldn't even think about approaching were approaching you. And what do you do about that? Well, you know what we did about that. And it's hard not. Now you're being paid more money than you've ever even thought about in your life. And somehow this weird thing called fame was there. And it's hard to wrap your brain around. But I think we got off the rails for probably a year and a half, then realized, we're still those 2 punks driving up and down Main Street. We just got lucky with some beautiful songs.
Yeah, and you know what? Your work never suffered. You never went through any dip in quality at all. When you went over to Verve, which was a period from 66 to 67, and of course your relationship with Phil ended acrimoniously. There was a lawsuit from Spector,
Yeah.
and MGM settled with a $600,000 payment to him. And then your revenge was a dish served very cold, which was You're My Soul and Inspiration, where you kind of outdid Spector. You out-Spectored Spector.
Well, I
You,
expected, yeah.
yeah, I mean, you'd learned everything from the guy
Yeah.
and you knew everything that you could do. And so, February 1966, talk about vindication. This is the definition of vindication. You're My Soul and Inspiration hits number one for 3 weeks. And it's even more haunting than any of the other Spector songs. It's just an otherworldly elegy to a great period of your career. And it's your final number one of the 60s. And I can't even, this must have felt better than literally anything in the 60s because you said goodbye to the guy and you made it on your own.
Yeah, it was a very interesting thing because yeah, it was supposed to be the follow-up to Lovin' Feelin. Barry and Cynthia were writing it. We were in New York and they got in a disagreement and went back to California working with Carol. So when we left Phil, I called Barry immediately and I said, "Where's that song that you were teaching us in New York?" So I think it's called Soul and Inspiration. And he said, "Well, we didn't even finish it." I said, "Well, finish it and send it to me." So he finished it, sent it to us, and he sent us a cassette. And on that cassette, man, was all the songs that they had written. I think Kicks, but that the Raiders ended up
Yeah.
doing. We Got to Get Out of This Place, which the Animals did. And if you listen to the Animals version, you'll hear where Bill Medley in the dirty old part of the city, and then and then that would be Bobby, and you can really hear it. But I turned them all down because I just wanted Soul and Inspiration.
That's so fun.
And when I produced Soul and Inspiration, one of the main things that I wanted to do was to make a real Righteous Brother record. I'd sing the first verse, Bobby would sing the second verse. Obviously, we'd do the choruses together. Then he did the little talking part, and I did the answer to it. So in reality, I think Soul and Inspiration, as wonderful as Just Once in My Life and Lovin' Feelin are, I really felt Soul and Inspiration was one of the better Righteous Brother records because it really was Bobby's and my song.
Yeah.
We were singing it together instead of one of us taking all of it.
And there's no way you could have known or felt this at the time because you were riding so high on the success of this song. But this is your last time cracking the top 10 until 1974. There's at least 5 other singles in the next couple of years that are as good as anything else you did. The one that is very mysterious to me is in September 66, you released White Cliffs of Dover, which is a personal favorite of mine. I love that song.
Great song.
You had recorded that with Phil, I believe.
Yeah.
That actually reached number 118, which for the life of me, I don't at all understand. To me, that's a number one song.
Well, I certainly thought it was as good as anything we did. We loved the song.
Were you starting to have nagging feelings at this point that, I wonder what's going on? Or
Yeah, I mean, everything came so easy for us and natural. When it started not happening, it was kind of weird to us. We didn't take offense to it. We knew it was probably an obvious thing that was going to happen. And that's when I left the Righteous Brothers to kind of go back to finish my dream of being a singer-songwriter.
the final first era Righteous Brothers single was the January 1968 single Here I Am, which again, zero signs of attrition. Great, great song. And then that next month, you broke up, which would last for more than 6 years. Yeah. Your debut solo single is brilliantly titled I Can't Make It Alone.
Yeah, written by Carole King.
Yeah, and a great song. What a genius first song to put out. And it's got something of the intensity of Just Once in My Life to it, but with a sadder, more resigned vibe to it.
Yeah, it was, I loved the song, and I knew I was shooting myself in the foot. I can't make it alone, telling the world this ain't going to happen. But really good song. I mean,
Yeah.
Carol and Jerry just wrote great songs. So did Barry and Cynthia.
But Bill, that takes balls, man. That takes balls. You're starting a solo career. You got everything riding on this, and you come out with a song called I Can't Make It Alone. That is brilliant conceptually, and it really just takes balls to do that. It really does.
Well, so that's what happened to him.
The work is incredible. It's a great song. I like your second song even better. August 68, Brown Eyed Woman. That's a killer. It's got a really thick Muscle Shoals-like vibe to it. The female background chorus is spot on, and your vocals are as impassioned as you ever were.
Well, I love that song. It's probably one of my favorite records. I just loved it. I love the simplicity of it, and we kind of got away from the wall of sound thing a little bit, and just was a real musical song. So I loved it.
I think you were doing great work right out of the gate there. And so as the decade turned, what were your thoughts on the Not So Righteous Brothers, on Bobby and Jimmy Walker and their work?
I thought it was okay.
Okay.
They didn't get that. Jimmy Walker was actually shorter than Bobby, and what Bobby, and he actually sang as high as Bobby. So what Bobby and I had going was one was tall, one was short, one was blonde, one was dark. It was just two different animals. And Bobby and Jimmy, it seemed like two Bobby Hatfields up on stage.
All right, that about does it. If you enjoyed this episode, please Venmo Gebro. I repeat, Venmo Gebro at David-Gebro, Gebroe. Please keep in mind this is entirely how I support my wife and my 5-year-old son, so don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not giving. Venmo me a tip at David-Gebro. Stay tuned, because next week we've got part 2 of Bill Medley's Discograffiti interview, in which Bill demonstrates admirable courage by plunging headfirst into a cathartic discussion of several really intense life tragedies. Okay, here's the week up ahead. This Sunday, our weekly show within a show, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast, drops for our Patreon's private tier. These are real people with talent and a burning fire deep inside, just like you and I. Get to know your new music-obsessed friends. Then, come Monday, we've got an interview with legendary producer Fred Mullen, the man who spearheaded the amazing upcoming Bill Medley solo record, Straight from the Heart, which will be released on Valentine's Day 2025. Come Monday, you'll hear how it all came together and be treated to tons of behind-the-scenes tales. You're not going to want to miss it. And then on Wednesday, the Lieutenant tier get their early release, ad-free, super extended director's cut of part 2 of Bill Medley's Discograffiti interview. And then come Friday, the rest of you penny pinchers get to join in on the action. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason, Bill Medley, Fred Mullen, Rudy Fishman, Becky Boyd, Jay Schultz, my incredibly loyal fans, and especially the entire Patreon community, the Soldiers of Sound. I love every last one of you, and this show would not exist without you, my friends. Speaking of friends, it's high time for some new ones. They're in our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. That's the best way to find out what's coming up on the show, but there's a hell of a lot more. You get recaps of the day in music history, the ability to pitch questions to guests, polls that put you in the driver's seat on guest and band decisions, access to a thriving creative hub if you're looking for a collaborator, and much, much more. So make sure you don't miss out. You can find the link to the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound Facebook page right there in the show notes. And if you don't mess with the Zuck, no sweat. Just email me at info@discograffiti.com and I'll keep you in the loop. So now that it's done and you want more, another way to dive even deeper into the greatest music ever made from the 1960s is to leap headfirst into my 16-hour interview with Michelle Phillips, which is, don't worry, not one episode, but strewn across episodes 141 to 159. Tom Morello rating the MC5, that's episode 177. My 12-hour interview with Jules Alexander and Terry Kirkman from The Association, that's episodes 109 to 113. Vashti Bunyan rating her entire catalog, that's 103 and 104. Os Mutantes Sergio Diaz on the early days of the band, that's 86 and 87. Burt Summer, that's 83 and 84. A tribute to David Crosby, 77 and 78. Lou Barlow rates the Zombies, that's 59 and 60. The Band, episodes 25 and 27. Monkees manager Andrew Sandoval rates the Monkees, that's 22 and 23. The Bee Gees' Psychedelic Beginnings, that's episode 10. And Sly and the Family Stone, 5, 6, and 7. And of course, be sure to mark your calendars, because next Friday, November 22nd, we're coming at you with part 2 of Bill Medley's Discograffiti interview. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. And so, from now till then, don't let our youth go to waste, lads and ladies. It's Discograffiti!